Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third FIFA Compliance Summit. I hope that wherever you are safe and taking the necessary precautions in this difficult time. I send my warmest greetings over Zoom to our members who are joining us from around the world, and I hope you are all well. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon in person when the COVID situation allows. The theme of this year, compliance, is implementing best practices. And in the spirit of sharing FIFA best practices, we will introduce to you the first ever FIFA compliance handbook later today. I'm delighted to see we have around 400 people taking part in this summit digitally, which shows the strong commitment of our member association to maintain the highest level of integrity throughout our work in football. This live stream is broadcast in the four FIFA languages: English, French, German, and Spanish. And at the bottom of your screen, you can select your language channel. The program for these coming days promises to be thought-provoking and informative, and I'm looking forward to the addresses of key keynote speakers, namely former US Attorney General Loretta Lynch, my former UN colleague Ilya Armstrong, Mr. Thomas Wessel, the chairman of the FIFA Audit and Compliance Committee, who will be joining us after the break with their insight on integrity and compliance. Compliance is not always considered the most exciting subject. In fact, people often don't realize how important and robust compliance initiatives are until it is too late. Former US Deputy Attorney General Paul McNulty sums it perfectly when he said, "If you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance." Following the now infamous dawn raid at the Borough Hotel in May 2015, that followed the investigation followed by Mrs. Loretta Lynch and her team, the world became aware of the real cost of non-compliance on FIFA and, more importantly, on football image. After the election of the president, Gianni Infantino, in 2016, he began a battle against all forms of corruption in football. And thanks to many positive changes made by him, FIFA is definitely a more transparent, a more compliant, and a more reliable institution. The FIFA president is the champion for compliance and has zero tolerance policy for misuse of funds intended for football. He will share with us his view on malpractices in football and the importance of rooting it out completely later. Most of you following online know me, and for those who don't, I'm Fatma Samura. I have been appointed FIFA Secretary General since 2016. Joining me on the panel today is our Chief Legal and Compliance, Mr. Emilio Garcia, and Patrick Trepanier, FIFA's Director of Compliance, who will take us through the FIFA compliance journey. So without any further ado, I would like to invite you to watch the video on FIFA compliance journey.
Real change comes not from words, but from actions. In 2016, FIFA declared its commitment to a new form of governance, to building an organisation that would stand apart as a model of best practice, an example to the world. At the heart of this commitment was the newly formed Compliance Division, the architects of a new institution built on the principles of transparency, fairness, and integrity. Since then, the Compliance Division has taken huge strides in making this commitment a reality and transforming FIFA into an organisation to be proud of. This is in stark contrast to the state of the organisation in 2015, when corruption and misconduct threatened the business continuity of the organisation. To rebuild FIFA's reputation, the 2016 FIFA Reform Committee proposed far-reaching measures to embed transparency and accountability at all levels of the organisation. Following the election of Gianni Infantino as FIFA president, the new FIFA quickly turned things around. The approved reform package and the revised FIFA statutes created the Compliance Division to be overseen by an independent audit and compliance committee, ensuring absolute integrity. The regulations governing FIFA's new Forward Development Programme establish statutory audits, central reviews and forensic audits as standard business practice across the sport. And a zero-tolerance policy to wrongdoing was adopted throughout the organisation. In 2017, we announced a new compliance programme. This was our commitment to change now taking shape. We set out an ambitious 3-year strategic development plan for compliance with clearly defined goals. We understood that in order for us to be truly effective, we needed to work with our member associations as partners to create a FIFA compliance community. To this end, we held the inaugural FIFA Compliance Summit. This would be our flagship event, the forum where the community could share ideas, support each other and improve, setting higher and higher compliance standards over time. We also advised on the bidding regulations for the FIFA World Cup 2026.
If there is anyone in this room or outside of this room who still thinks that he can enrich himself, that he can abuse of football, I have one clear and strong message to tell him. Leave football, and leave football now.
The 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia had a stronger and more comprehensive compliance programme than any tournament before it. And we continued our work beyond the tournament, launching a new code of conduct and compliance directives addressing many areas. Dedicated compliance advisors were appointed for business units, and a face-to-face compliance training program was rolled out. The second Compliance Summit attracted a significantly greater attendance from across the member associations. In 2019, we developed a new compliance program focused on preventing, detecting and mitigating compliance risks at the FIFA Women's World Cup in France, the most popular edition yet. Back in Zurich, the Legal and Integrity Division was renamed as the Legal and Compliance Division, with the appointment of a Chief Legal and Compliance Officer. The Internal Audit Subdivision was also further strengthened. FIFA launched the bidding process for the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023, with FIFA compliance again playing a key role in ensuring fairness and integrity and joining all inspection visits to the bidding member associations as part of the FIFA delegation. Now, 4 years on, we have re-evaluated our purpose and clearly defined our mission and our vision to continuously improve the ethical and compliance environment within FIFA and the world of football, and to do this while being trusted and approachable. Our vision is to be a leader in ethics and compliance in international sports within a best-in-class organisation that is transparent and accountable. And we believe in simple and practical solutions to help us achieve our goals. This is what we call Compliance 3.0, a new philosophy of compliance for today's world. Compliance 3.0 has 2 pillars. The first pillar is about making compliance resources available and accessible to all stakeholders. With the launch of the first FIFA Compliance Handbook, we want to share best practices and bring compliance to our member associations in an easy-to-use format. The compliance directives have also been reshaped into accessible pocket guides, written and tailored not for the rule makers, but for the end users. The second pillar focuses on the use of technology to ensure an effective and efficient compliance function. Through the creation of an internal compliance portal, a one-stop shop for all compliance-related topics, we are utilising technology to facilitate more awareness and a better understanding of compliance topics within the organisation. Today, the work of the compliance team at FIFA is globally recognised. Since its inception in 2017, FIFA has been ranked in the top quarter in the independent assessment led by the Association of Summer Olympic International Federations. This association is mandated with helping international sport federations to promote a culture of good governance within their organisation. Data protection experts have been brought into the compliance team, enabling us to provide even greater support to the member associations, confederations and football clubs. This year's Compliance Summit, which is going digital for the 3rd edition, aims to strengthen the compliance community and provide more opportunities for us to connect and develop our compliance processes together. We are proud of the progress we have made.
So we are a credible, a trustworthy, a modern, a professional and an accountable organization. We are that for you, the member associations.
And as the compliance subdivision continues to evolve and improve our processes, we will always stay focused on our aim to lead the way in ethics and compliance in international sports.
I hope you enjoyed the video, which was a great way to summarize FIFA's incredible compliance achievement in just 4 years. Let me now welcome President Infantino for his introductory remarks. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fatma, and of course, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world. A special welcome, please allow me, to Loretta Lynch, former US Attorney General, to Mr. Thomas Wessel as well, Chairman of the Audit and Compliance Committee, and to Ilya Armstrong, Director of the Ethics Office of the UN Secretariat. Welcome to you. I can see you on my screen, so a great welcome. It's great to have you here. And it is a pleasure to have all of you who are following us today, together, of course, with Fatma, Emilio Garcia here in the office, and obviously Patrick Trépanier, who is the master of the ceremony. So if anything goes wrong, you can tell him. He's in charge of compliance, so everything is at least compliant and hopefully as well good. This is, dear ladies and gentlemen, the third FIFA Compliance Office, the first in a virtual format. Unfortunately, we cannot be physically together today, but in spite of being distant, we are obviously close today and throughout the whole week, because one peculiarity of this summit is that it lasts a whole week with many meetings. We are meeting virtually, of course, at a time where our priorities have shifted. It has become apparent that health is the most important value we have. It is even more important, as we say, than football or soccer for our American friends. Obviously, health is the most important. We have to take this into account. So this pandemic has forced us, on one side, to pause and also to reconsider a little bit how we were doing and how we are doing things at a practical level. It has also given us time a little bit to reflect on what we did as an institution in the last 4 years. I think that FIFA, to take an analogy with the pandemic, FIFA went through its own pandemic back in 2015. And so we have been able to elaborate and to develop our own vaccines and our own immunity system to reinforce it, to make sure we are well equipped for future pandemics and crises. We did it how? We did it with reforms on governance, reforms on compliance. We did it with new rules and, of course, as well with new people, because you know that the best rules in the world are not worth much if the tone doesn't come from the top, if we don't have the right people in the right positions to help us, not only cleaning football, but also maintaining the highest levels of compliance. So what was FIFA before? Well, FIFA in 2015, the old FIFA was, let's face it, a toxic organization, an organization which was clinically dead, an organization which was actually an organized kleptocracy, where those whose job was to help football grow instead helped their own bank accounts grow, and the bank accounts, accessorily, of their friends. Instead of serving football, which was the task of those who are or who were in positions like ours, they were serving themselves. FIFA had become a self-service shop where hundreds of millions literally evaporated. The new FIFA, in contrast, stands today as a credible organization, a trustworthy organization, a modern, professional and accountable organization, but most importantly, an organization which is and has to be at the service of football. With the reforms that were approved in 2016, we brought in accountability and transparency at every level. Mandatory auditing, term limits for senior officials, because we have to be aware that we are here for a limited period of time, which has a beginning and an end. And we have to make sure that when we hand over the organization, it will be done in a correct way. We have an obligation to declare conflicts of interest. We have introduced transparency around the compensation of senior officials of FIFA, which was also a taboo topic, and we have introduced transparent bidding processes for our own competitions. I will come back to that, but most importantly, we have introduced an internal compliance function with a dedicated compliance subdivision. It is very important that this message goes through internally to start with, because we cannot go out and give lessons if internally we are not equipped to do that. So these are all essentials, elements in order to have a proper business structure. And we are proud, let me say that, of course, I'm not objective when I do this, but I am proud. If I look at the past, I was one of the critics of FIFA in the past. I'm proud of the open culture that we brought into the organization, of the compliance culture that we brought into what we do. Now, obviously, you don't hear too much about how FIFA internally has turned around things to 180 degrees, and probably in a way this is right, because if our compliance division would make headlines, this would mean that we are doing something wrong. But at the same time, I think it is important that we communicate about what we are doing, and it is important that we make known as well that well, actually, there has not been any FIFA scandal in the last 4.5 years. And this has happened because we have put our house in order. And not just our house, we have been cleaning up the sport across the world. Of course, there is always a lot to do, and there will always be a lot to do to create a culture of openness, to create a proactive cooperation with auditors, with public authorities. Before 2015, to give you just one example, each football association around the world was receiving around $300,000 every year, but without virtually any control. Today, each association receives $1.5 million every year, 5 times more. But everything is audited, everything is checked internally and externally. And maybe at the beginning, some associations were happier, and you are all following me and following what I say, were happier to receive 300,000 without any controls. But in the meantime, everyone has understood that it's better to receive 5 times more to be invested in football, because this is good for everyone, for the country, and for the associations. Well, obviously, these controls, these checks, this new way of working has caused problems to some people. I myself have been associated recently with some unspecified, unfounded allegations. And well, yes, maybe this is part of the price that you have to pay if you are serious about cleaning up an organization, if you really and seriously want to liberate FIFA from the shadows of the past. And it's obvious that this process upsets many people, those who don't like reforms, those who want to go back to the past, and those from the past who have things to hide and don't want these to come out. Well, to all of these, my message is very clear. It has been very clear from day one. We go on straight as we were doing so far. And when you think that these allegations have come out through my own proactive approach to cooperation with the local authorities here in Switzerland, meetings with the Attorney General of Switzerland, exactly in the same way as I meet any other authority around the world who is helping us and who is committed to help us in cleaning up football. This was my clear message from day one. It continues to be my clear message. And obviously, looking at all this, it is, I would say, at best funny, at least absurd, but we go on and we will make these things very clear as well in the future. In the same line, I met just 3 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., the Attorney General, William Barr. And today we have with us Loretta Lynch, the former Attorney General of the United States of America. So let me say this again, very loud and very clear. We have zero tolerance for corruption and wrongdoing in football. When FIFA officials, and it is important to clarify that FIFA itself was an injured party, was a victim. It is important to stress that. So when FIFA officials were indicted for criminal acts in the United States, we gave our full support, and throughout the last 4 years we gave our full support to the Department of Justice and to the Attorney General at that time and those after. And Loretta Lynch herself, as I said, former US Attorney General and internationally respected lawyer, will be speaking to all of you later today. So thanks again, Loretta, for being here with us. I would like to repeat as well what I said at the FIFA Congress last month. In front of 211 member countries, member associations of FIFA, in front of the world media, we have to thank the United States Department of Justice for saving FIFA and for saving football from itself, whilst others were just watching. So here we are today with our third compliance summit to speak about compliance. And to speak about that, let me mention a couple of things. You might be aware that in June, FIFA Council has decided to approve a COVID-19 relief plan with a global value of $1.5 billion. This is definitely unprecedented. It is historic and it has no equal in sport. So we have been able to do this because FIFA is in a very healthy and solid financial situation. This was not the case 4 years ago. But not only we have set aside a significant amount of money in our reserves, which now allow us to make such a COVID relief package, we have also made sure that in the new FIFA money does not simply disappear anymore. Money goes there where it has to go in football. And when we can help, like in this particular situation of the pandemic, we have to help. Obviously, when you speak about money and distribution, it's important that any system which is put in place has appropriate accountability and good governance structures. We have put them in place. The steering committee supervising this whole exercise is chaired by Mr. Olli Rehn. Olli Rehn is a former vice president of the European Commission and currently the governor of the Bank of Finland. So we will know exactly where the money goes and why the money is going where it has to go. This will be done in a fully transparent way. And this is as well the direct result of the reforms that we brought in this compliance process, which is checking every step of the money that goes out from FIFA and also of the money that, of course, comes into FIFA. Now we have accountability on every cent coming in and every cent going out, not just with the COVID-19 relief plan, but also with our Forward program, the Forward program, which is our solidarity program all around the world, bringing to 211 member associations funds to develop football. And also here, as I said before, we multiplied by 5 the funds available to the member associations in football. Again, not because we made 5 times more revenues in FIFA, but simply because money doesn't disappear and money goes where it has to go in football development. Let me add one word as well, because it's also part of good governance and compliance. Let me add a word about the bidding processes for the award of our World Cups. We had 2 in the last 4 years, the Men's World Cup 2026 and the Women's World Cup 2023. And guess what? We could not read any negative headline, any scandal around the award and around the whole bidding process of these 2 World Cups. Whereas in the previous 100 years, whether true or invented, it doesn't matter. But there were always stories around the award of World Cups. Well, these things do not happen on their own, dear friends. These things happen because we all work together, because we put in place systems which are transparent, which are professionals, and which don't allow strange things to happen. So now I think we have established a culture of transparency and of accountability, and it is time now, dear friends, to share this with all of you, for FIFA to share with our member associations the best practices that we ourselves have adopted, have learned, have developed in these years, and also to hear from you your ideas, whether we are realistic in what we do, whether we have to be a bit more pragmatic, whether we have to be a bit more practical. How can we help you most, keeping in mind and bearing in mind what we need to do in terms of good governance and compliance? And this is exactly the reason why we are here today, why we are here this whole week, to come together, to share experiences, to explore how we can improve, to learn, of course, from the past, from what we did good, from what we did less good. Even we did, of course, many mistakes in the last 4 years, and we will do more mistakes in the future, but we have to learn from these mistakes. And for this reason as well, it makes me proud as FIFA president to see an event like this taking place with more than 400 participants from all over the world. It is virtual, and it allows us to share, to be present, to be accessible, and also to have such a strong lineup of distinguished speakers today. So I hope really that in the course of today, in the course of this week, you will see the FIFA that I'm proud of. A credible, trustworthy, modern, professional, and accountable organization that is proactively making it easier for its members to adopt best practices, knowing the specificities of each region, of each country, but to adopt best practices and to get their affairs in top order. Because the image of everyone will be the image of FIFA and the image of football. So you will hear much more in the course of this week about many of the things that we have been doing, such as the new FIFA compliance handbook and the abundance of supporting materials that is available in an open and transparent way, again, online for all of you. But I leave this up to the different experts to present to you. From my side, just a message of working and continue to working together, because one person alone cannot do anything. We need to work together, and we are part of the same team, the team that has to protect football. We have to work for that, and we are working for that. I count on all of you. So, dear friends, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your attendance here today and for your commitment today and in the future, and also, of course, in the past. We are moving in the right direction. There is still a lot of work to be done, but we have to continue in this path. So again, thanks very much. Thanks for your contributions. Thanks for being here. And now it is my great honor to introduce to you Miss Loretta Lynch. Please. Hi, Loretta.
Good day, good afternoon.
Good morning for you, I guess.
It is good morning for me, but I wish everyone a good day, good afternoon, good morning. But most of all, I want to thank all of you for coming together to discuss this important topic. Thank you so much, President Infantino, for those really searching and thoughtful comments, as well as your acknowledgement of the importance of compliance here, as evidenced by the numbers of people who have signed up for this event. I do think it is important to focus on the history of compliance and also FIFA's own history with this, because only by confronting history can one move forward into the future. And of course, perhaps more than any other organization, this organization knows all too well the perils of failing to sufficiently focus on and dedicate resources to compliance. As we have previously discussed, it was not too long ago that the world of football found itself in a state of upheaval, indeed of chaos, as a result of the systemic corruption and misconduct that was able to flourish for decades. But what was most painful about that, for all of us who observed those activities, were not just the shattering of the stunning array of criminal activity, but the shattering of trust that it engendered in this great sport. Now, since then, together with all of you, FIFA as an organization has made great efforts to educate, to train, and to promote within a culture of compliance. And I'm heartened to hear of FIFA's renewed commitment to transparency and ethical behavior and its desire to improve the compliance environment throughout all of football, with the important objective of safeguarding this sport. And I commend each of you who are here today on behalf of the various member associations and confederations for dedicating your time and your focus over the course of this week to learning more about the crucial role that compliance plays within each of your individual organizations and within FIFA as a whole. Like the great sport of football, compliance is a team sport. Good teams have strong cultures that include shared accountability and that model expected behavior. And with compliance, the goal is, as it must be, to improve the odds for success by preventing the costly mistakes that can damage the team's record and standing. Now, let's be clear, compliance is not just a front office or compliance department responsibility, as important as those components are. Of course, the commitment must start at the top. The tone must be set by those at the top, but all of the members of the organization must be engaged. They must have an appreciation of the importance of compliance, and most importantly, they must act in accordance with that understanding. In truth, every individual within the organization has a role to play when it comes to compliance, and when each individual does his or her part, then and only then does the team win. And in a global organization like FIFA, the compliance function plays the crucial role of safeguarding the organization from threats both internal and external. Now, it not only instills trust within the organization, but it also helps rebuild and garner the trust of the outside world. If the compliance function succeeds, then the organization stands to reap critical benefits such as the deterrence of future lapses, stability in the face of unexpected change, and potential leniency in the event of misconduct. But if the compliance function fails, the organization risks significant damage, in the worst case scenario, outright destruction. Now, before I delve into the heart of my remarks today, I want to share a bit with you about my observations from my time in public office and beyond about the ever-increasing trend of cooperation among international law enforcement. Now, this trend of cooperation, I believe, underscores why it is so vitally important to have a robust culture of compliance within a global organization such as FIFA, a compliance culture designed to guard against misconduct. Now, prior to serving as the Attorney General of the United States, I served as the United States Attorney in Brooklyn, New York. I was responsible for all federal prosecutions as well as defense of the federal government over a 5-county area with over 8 million residents. Our caseload was wide-ranging, it was impactful, and it often, frankly, it almost always had an international component. Now, I initially saw this component in our narcotics and money laundering docket, as we focused on the international cartels who thought that my district might be an easy and open market for their wares. But our international focus, indeed, the international focus of the entire Department of Justice, increased significantly after the terrorist attacks of September 11th. We built strong relationships with our overseas partners that enabled us to both prevent and prosecute terrorist activity. But because New York is not just the center of our financial markets, but also a major clearinghouse for international financial transactions, our financial investigations expanded in that area as well. And we built on the relationships begun to expand to cover this area as well. And we worked with international law enforcement partners literally around the globe. And it was then my great honor to serve as the United States Attorney General during the administration of President Barack Obama. And while serving as Attorney General, in addition to my domestic responsibilities, I was privileged to represent the United States in meetings and conferences with my foreign counterparts, as well as in discussions regarding joint initiatives on matters ranging from international narcotics to privacy. I continued to see great strides made in cooperation by international law enforcement because we are living in an era in which crime truly occurs on a global scale. Transnational criminal enterprises and global corporate misconduct are now no longer rare at all. And indeed, as crime and corruption increasingly transcend national borders, as our national economies become even more greatly part of and dependent upon the global economy, all of us, but particularly those of us who work in the legal profession, have witnessed how government efforts to protect people from harm, to fight crime, and to secure justice increasingly requires international cooperation. And as a result, to fight crime on a global scale, countries around the world, including the United States, continue to forge deep coalitions with their international enforcement and regulatory partners. Now, these coalitions and the attendant acts of collaboration have been especially important when it comes to threats posed by international corruption. Corruption renders countries less safe, less stable. Corruption thwarts economic development. It undercuts credible justice systems, and then it inhibits the ability of companies to compete overseas on a level playing ground. But prior to 1997, when the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, Anti-Bribery Convention was signed, promoting good governance and the rule of law was not always on the international agenda. As I've noted in my own practice, 9/11 changed that issue. Internationally, the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention brought about great changes and indeed led to great strides in international cooperation. Prior to that, there was no effective multinational framework for the prevention and prosecution of bribery. Graft was often just simply considered the cost of doing business. But after the convention was implemented in 1999, the United States at that time was the only country with laws on the books, like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or FCPA. But the convention created a binding agreement for signatory countries to criminalize foreign bribery by their nationals and to agree to provide mutual support for any bribery prosecution. Today, there are over 40 nations that are parties to this convention, and each of them have passed laws that criminalize the bribery of foreign officials, and these signatories have joined arms in the fight against international corruption. As a result, today, collaboration and coordination among multiple regulators in cross-border matters is the norm rather than the exception in enforcement efforts against bribery and corruption. And we do not see or anticipate a reversal of this development. Now, just to give you one example, in 2016, when I was serving as the United States Attorney General, the Department of Justice crafted a criminal resolution with VimpelCom Limited. At the time, VimpelCom was the world's sixth largest telecommunications provider. The resolution included its wholly owned Uzbek subsidiary of Unitel, LLC. And what we saw in that case, what the investigation developed, was that through various executives and employees, VimpelCom and Unitel had paid more than $114 million US in bribes to an Uzbek government official. This official was a close relative of another high-ranking government official who had influence over the Uzbek governmental body that regulated the telecom industry. And these bribes were paid so that VimpelCom could enter the Uzbek market, and so that Unitel could gain valuable telecom assets as well as continue operating in Uzbekistan. Now, there was a time when this type of activity simply would have gone unchecked. This is not that time. For this conduct, VimpelCom agreed to pay the United States a criminal penalty of more than $230 million US. The Department of Justice sought forfeiture of more than $850 million US in the funds that were traceable to the attempt to bribe this Uzbek official. There, the cost of noncompliance was high indeed, and it continues to rise. The United States did not act alone in this important case. We coordinated our efforts with the Public Prosecution Service of the Netherlands. Now, the Public Prosecution Service of the Netherlands brought their own criminal case and imposed their own multi-million-dollar fine. But the investigation overall was assisted by a number of law enforcement partners overseas, especially those in Sweden, Switzerland, Latvia, Belgium, Ireland, Luxembourg, and the United Kingdom. This grouping is also not unusual and will continue. This landmark case was made possible by the tracing of illicit funds through various countries around the world, and without the assistance of those other countries in obtaining documentary evidence, such as bank records and executing search warrants, the US prosecution would not have been possible. These coalitions are strengthened by successes, such as I mentioned here. And these countries are still continuing to look for ways to collaborate and cooperate in rooting out corruption. This effort did not start with VimpelCom, nor does it end there. And throughout my tenure as Attorney General, and since the time that I've left public service and returned to the private sector, law enforcement in the United States and elsewhere around the world have continued to coordinate closely and cooperate together to meet the challenges of the international nature of criminal activity. Now, in a world in which crime and corruption literally know no borders, law enforcement has found it imperative to work together to obtain critical evidence and to deny criminals safe haven. And today, rarely does the Department of Justice and other US regulators bring cases involving foreign bribery and corruption without having had the benefit of assistance from their international law enforcement partners. We've seen this in recent criminal and civil enforcement actions brought against financial institutions such as Deutsche Bank, Barclays, and Societe Generale, as well as against multinational companies such as Walmart, Samsung, and Airbus. Now, working cooperatively and efficiently with foreign counterparts is a necessity for effective law enforcement in this day and age. It is based upon the relationships built over years that are sustained by these successful efforts. The sharing of information, the sharing of intelligence has become standard operating procedure. Indeed, international law enforcement cooperation has remained a linchpin of many international relationships, even with and despite the current retrenchment in US diplomacy in key areas. Now, at the same time, global organizations find themselves under the exacting lens of law enforcement and regulators the world over. As organizations participate in the world economy, as they expand their global reach, they're subject to the laws and regulations of often far-flung jurisdictions. This means that organizations that operate around the globe must be vigilant in internally policing misconduct and in cultivating an atmosphere within of ethical behavior and compliance. Now, the VimpelCom case that I mentioned, as well as the many others that have followed over the years, highlight the fact that U.S. authorities have made and continue to make efforts to leverage their collaborative relationships with foreign law enforcement partners. But it's also a stark example of the type of failure in compliance that can literally imperil an organization. And by the company's own admissions, VimpelCom falsified its books and records. They attempted to conceal and disguise the bribery scheme by classifying payments as things they were not. These are classic hallmarks of corruption cases. But also, it failed to implement and enforce adequate internal accounting controls, and that allowed the bribe payments to occur without detection or remediation. And when the board of directors sought a legal opinion assessing corruption risks involved in these transactions, certain members of management, people at the highest levels of this company, withheld crucial information from outside counsel that were performing the review. That led to a restriction of the scope of those opinions, rendering them worthless. And rather than implement and enforce a strong anti-corruption ethic, certain VimpelCom executives tried to give the company plausible deniability of illegality while knowingly proceeding with the corrupt business transactions. Now, this misconduct illustrates the critical need for and the vital importance of having a robust compliance program intended and designed to safeguard the organization from the dangerous consequences of noncompliance. But as we all know, the need to establish and implement an effective compliance program is no longer limited to the corporate sector. And due to the high profile and highly profitable nature of sports, athletic organizations are also vulnerable to misconduct and to public perception of mismanaging allegations of misconduct in order to protect their programs. And when significant incidents play out in public, sports organizations can face considerable reputational, financial, and even legal exposure. Now, while a strong compliance program can never completely eliminate risk, it absolutely can reduce the risk and the severity of damage. Now, what then are the benefits of a robust compliance function within an organization? We've talked about examples where the absence of such a function led to the almost downfall of a telecom company. But compliance programs are more than just an added layer of red tape. When designed and implemented correctly, they can be valuable tools for mitigating risk and creating a compliance-minded culture that facilitates the institution's goals. But first and foremost, a compliance program helps ensure that an organization operates within the law at the bare minimum. It helps ensure that an organization stays true to its own mission, including the ethical principles that are important to an organization's identity and to its purpose. Now, organizations that employ robust and effective compliance programs are not only better able to detect and identify compliance issues that will negatively impact the organization's business and reputation, but also those instances where a member is intent on circumventing the organization's internal controls. Simply put, a strong compliance program can go a long way toward preventing problems from the outset. And just as significantly, a compliance program can demonstrate to the organization's members and to the community at large that the organization is committed to conducting itself in an ethical manner. But the truth is that things can and often do go wrong, even where there's a strong compliance program in place. Even the most robust compliance program can sometimes fail to prevent every instance of misconduct. And in those cases, how an institution elects to deal with the misconduct defines its culture. It sends a message about how serious the organization is about fixing the problem and preventing it from recurring going forward. And an effective compliance program is a signal to external parties that regardless of the outcome, the institution has identified, assessed, and resolved the incident in good faith through a strong, structured process. And even more importantly, it's a signal to internal components and employees that wrongdoers will not gain traction within the organization and that individual compliance is indeed prized. Now, relatedly, an added benefit for an organization that employs a robust compliance program is that the organization will be in a significantly better position to address concerns raised by regulators or governments if and when an organization's conduct comes under scrutiny. Now more than ever, regulators in the United States and elsewhere are focused with a laser-like intensity on the adequacy and the effectiveness of an organization's compliance program at the time of suspected misconduct. And in certain instances, having an effective compliance program in place may result in the organization avoiding an enforcement action altogether. In others, it may mitigate the size of the penalty imposed. Now, just last year and again this past June, the Department of Justice's Criminal Division published guidance that describes the specific factors that criminal prosecutors should consider when contemplating prosecution of an organization, and highlighted was a consideration of the adequacy and the effectiveness of the organization's compliance program at the time of the offense, as well as the organization's remedial efforts to implement such a program. Now, the department declines to outline a rigid formula for assessing the effectiveness of compliance programs, and in fact, it will continue to make case-by-case determinations. But the guidance organizes a number of topics and questions into three central categories based on three fundamental questions. Number one, first and foremost, is the compliance program well designed? Does it have a structure? Has it been thought through? Does it take into account the risks attendant in the relevant industry? Is it well designed? Second, is the program being applied earnestly and in good faith? In other words, is the program being implemented effectively? Is the program being utilized? Are employee complaints being considered? When issues rise to the top, are they dealt with? Is the program being applied? And finally, does the compliance program work in practice? Literally, does it work? Does it in fact find misconduct? Does it in fact provide a way, a transparent way for dealing with that misconduct such that all within the organization know of the commitment to ethics and compliance? Now, by asking these three fundamental questions and ensuring that they're able to answer them affirmatively, institutions should be better able to identify risks and to mitigate those risks and remediate shortcomings. At the same time, other enforcement agencies in the United States, for example, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, as well as the department's Antitrust Division, have similarly sought to provide additional transparency over recent years. They've published their own guidance that describes what those agencies view to be the essential elements of an effective compliance programs and the factors that should be considered in evaluating those programs. But suffice it to say, regulators are expecting more and not less from organizations when it comes to their compliance programs and the cultures of compliance that they cultivate. Now, with an appreciation of the benefits of having a compliance program, the question that faces every organization, the question I think for all of you this week, thus becomes, what makes for an effective compliance program? Now, an effective compliance program, one that is considered robust, is generally not developed from an off-the-shelf model. It must be tailored to the unique needs and circumstances of the organization. As every allegation and incident or crisis inevitably will be unique, a compliance program must also be sufficiently flexible to address varying incidents. This flexible framework must encourage incident reporting. It must contain a structure for managing and escalating and responding to issues and allegations as they arise. Now, the minutiae of programs will vary, but it is important to keep in mind certain key overarching principles. First, as I've mentioned before, the identification of issues and risks. It is critical to identify the specific risks that a particular organization faces, and for the compliance program to reflect those risks. There may be risks presented by, among other things, the location of the organization's operations, the industry sector in which it operates, the competitiveness of the market, the regulatory landscape, actual and potential customers and business partners, transactions with foreign governments, and payments made to foreign officials. But there must be an assessment of risk, identifying the risks to the organization as a whole. Global compliance personnel benefit from close collaboration with their regional counterparts, who will often have a better awareness of and insights into the risks presented by those specific geographic jurisdictions and markets. Risk assessment is fundamental to an effective compliance program precisely because one size does not fit all. Now, the approach and the procedure may differ across organizations depending upon the risks assessed, but that is the foundation. Second, and relatedly, a functioning compliance program must contain effective reporting mechanisms within the organization through which individual members may raise suspicions, make allegations, and voice concerns without fear of retaliation or retribution. And as compliance issues are identified, they must be appropriately investigated and remediated in a timely manner. Even discrete and minor issues have the ability to pose an existential threat that imperils the well-being and viability of the entire organization. Third, a commitment to implementation. This is vital. Compliance is not just a check-the-box exercise. An entire organization, from its leadership to its most junior member, must know about, must understand, and engage with the institution's compliance program. Critical to a successful program is the tone at the top. A compliance program, no matter how well written on paper, is literally useless without a credible commitment from the organization's leadership to enforce and follow through with the commitments contained therein. In short, if the leaders of an organization do not care about compliance, neither will any of the members. And one member can bring down an entire organization. Each member, no matter their title, their rank, their role, their responsibility, must embrace a culture and mentality of compliance in order to effect change within the organization. And most importantly, organizations truly committed to compliance must abandon the outdated view that such programs are merely a cost center that provide no return, and instead see them as an essential investment into the health and future of the organization. People must be able to see this implementation with senior leaders held accountable as well as junior employees. Now, against this backdrop, again, a challenging environment in which to operate, it is commendable that FIFA is hosting this compliance summit for the third year in a row. By making compliance a focus within the organization, the entire world of football truly stands to gain from these efforts. And that is especially important now, as sports have assumed a greater role than ever in forging vital connections between us as we face down a global pandemic that mandates a level of isolation we could not have contemplated a short year ago. Of course, the global importance of sports goes far beyond its current role as a panacea for the pandemic, although that is important. Sports are one of the primary ways that we teach our children about character, about fair play, and about teamwork. Far more than just a game, sports provide the connection to a common goal that we all crave. Global tournaments promote understanding between nations. They embody an acknowledgement of our common humanity, something vitally important in these trying times and beyond. Now, these goals and attributes that sit at the heart of international sports are intangible, yet they are essential to all who inhabit this world, be they players, businessmen, fans, or children gathering in a practice field. Corruption, abuse, and other forms of misconduct undermine their faith, not just in the game, but in all of you. Thus, the world of sports must embrace compliance just as strongly as the worlds of business and finance. Now, I hope that you will take full advantage of everything this summit stands to offer you this week. It's an opportunity for FIFA to explain to you, the organization's member associations and confederations, its approach toward compliance, to discuss in detail the key elements of an effective compliance program, and to share best practice. When the inaugural FIFA Compliance Summit was held in 2017, I'm told that a mere 29 individual member associations and confederations attended. It is gratifying to see that number grow over the years to over 400 times more than the year before in 2018. And I believe that this year, you are graced with over 160 individual member associations and confederations and 400 representatives from the member associations. This growth is heartening. In this summit, you have an important and unique opportunity to share perspectives and best practices and to collaborate together in support of FIFA's objective to help safeguard football and to ensure that this sport, the most popular in the world, is there for the next generation. You have the opportunity to strengthen good governance and promote ethical conduct across international football. May you embrace not just the lessons from this summit, but the opportunity to lead in this area. All who love the game are watching. I want to thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you today. Thank you for your time and your attention, but thank you also for your focus on these important issues. I wish you an outstanding summit.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Loretta, for your inspiring words. I can just repeat it, and I don't know if you realize the importance not only of your words today, but also of the work you and your team have been doing in the past years for football and for FIFA. And that's why I think it was really gratifying to hear you. It was important for us to hear that you remind us on one side of the sporting values of what we need to do to protect our sport, the most beautiful sport in the world, certainly the most popular. But we need to protect these values. And to do that, thanks also for reminding us that we need to commit to compliance. We need to commit to implement compliance, not just to make a handbook or a regulation or whatever, but to implement it, to live it. And in all this, of course, we are facing, as you say, many challenges. I mean, the whole international aspect that you outlined is a very peculiar one that we are facing. And I think that FIFA has been for many years, maybe even decades, hiding behind what we were calling, or they were calling, the autonomy of sport in order to get everyone in terms of authorities out of the sport. We are autonomous, we know what we are doing. Well, we are not. We are part of our countries, we are part of the world. And for me, we need to cooperate, obviously, with the law enforcement authorities because we are simply also a sports organization. We can have all the compliance systems we want. We don't have the tools to enforce certain things. And for this, we don't have to be afraid of the cooperation, of the exchange, and of the enforcement of laws by the law enforcement agencies. On the contrary, we have to be there to help and to assist, but we have as well, that's my firm belief, to deserve this cooperation. We have to do our part of the job. We have to implement good governance, ethics, and compliance at the highest standards. And only like this we deserve, indeed, to be where we are and to continue working. But again, thanks very much. It's really inspiring. And as I told you, I don't know if you realize the importance of your work, but thanks from everyone who loves football, really. And I hope that it was rewarding for you as well to act as well in our area and field and to do something good for many, many boys and girls around the world who love this sport.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Take care. And now I think we have a break, right?
Yes. 5-minute break.
5, 10?
10 minutes.
10-minute break. And then we are back.
welcome back, everyone. And let me, before we go back to business, echo the word of the FIFA president relating to Loretta's speech. It was definitely a very powerful message. So thank you, Loretta, if you are listening to us, for your food for thought on fighting corruption and also business malpractice. Your views on the need to apply a robust, effective, meaningful, and very important tailored program responding to the need of the organization will certainly inspire our audience around the world. Now let me welcome our second speaker, Mr. Thomas Wessel, who is not only the FIFA chairman for the Audit and Compliance Committee, but is also serving a 9-year term as the president of the Court of Auditors for Slovenia. Thomas is an author of several studies and articles on compliance and on audit, but he's also lecturing in Slovenia and abroad. So welcome, Thomas, to this panel. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Fatma. Thanks for that kind introduction. I hope you can hear me. Cool, perfect, thank you. Hello to everybody, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever it is. I'm grateful that I can have an opportunity to speak to such a distinguished club of colleagues, may I say so, because, you know, we are sharing the same love and same affection to compliance. Why? Because we believe in strong institutions, right? Yes, that's right. I'm chairing the Audit and Compliance Committee, the supervisory body of FIFA. And also compensation subcommittee, which is more related duty to being chairman of the Audit and Compliance Committee, which is also responsible, of course, for the monitoring of forward funding and all the other programs within FIFA. So we take it as a huge responsibility, of course. As President clearly stated that we went through quite a remarkable path from the toxic institution in 2015 and 16, almost as a synonym for the corruption, to the possible situation that we are right now, that we can offer to the world, to the sport organization, FIFA, as a best practice model in sense of governance model. Maybe this is a little bit within too high words, but I think it's quite true. We can show some results after the couple of years based on the work of actually everybody. So the journey was quite impressive in those couple of years, and we have to show something, and we are proud to show to the world. And first of all, I would like to use this opportunity and to thank my colleagues within the Audit and Compliance Committee, which are Ivančica Sudas from Croatia, Chris Min from United States of America, Mr. Bonilla from Mexico, Gustavo Fabre from Chile, Yuichiro Nakajima from Japan, and Andrew Kamanga from Zambia. I would like to thank them a lot because audit and compliance is not just because of me, but also because of them perceived as most challenging and demanding committee within FIFA. From this racial point of view, at least I hope so. It's that stated that we are hardworking, that we are very devoted to our work, that the members have to read a lot of materials, ask a lot of questions, be prepared for the discussions, and we have a long-lasting meetings, of course, which are dedicated to both parts of our job, audit and, of course, the compliance part. All the members are very much experienced within all different fields of expertise that helps to Audit and Compliance Committee to work in really full function and fully operational. Allowed me to present a little bit of both function of Audit and Compliance Committee, which is actually by the name of the audit part is maybe more clearly understandable because we have to take care of the independence of the statutory audit. We have to take care of all the financial results. We have to take care of the financial statements. We have to take care of the audit, and of course, the compliance part. The audit part is, and all the other aspects of the FIFA environment. But within the compliance function, this is also very interesting because if I take kind of a comparison to other sports organization or to other institutions as well, which they have some kind of supervisory board and more or less all they have them. It's very interesting that within the FIFA governance regulation is quite clearly defined that also from the compliance part, there are high demands for audit and compliance committee, such as we have to review the status of FIFA compliance within the law, FIFA rules and regulation related to compliance, to monitor compliance with FIFA policies regarding social responsibility, human rights, environmental protection, and gender equality matters, to review reports directly to the Audit and Compliance Committee submitted by Chief Compliance Officer, which is, of course, our obligation, and we are doing that, to review FIFA employees' compliance with the law and all relevant FIFA rules and regulation, and also to review FIFA rules and regulation related to compliance with regard to their effectiveness. And this is also challenging because we challenged in the past time quite a lot the FIFA rules and regulations and improve them together with administration. So in time we improved also this, if I may say so, legislative part of our work. We have also to issue guidelines regarding compliance matter, and we did. And we are also obliged to make recommendations regarding any changes, amendments, and modification to FIFA rules and regulation relating to compliance. It is also our obligation to handle cases of alleged non-compliance, and we did in past couple of years. And we didn't stop even when it was in question some possible wrongdoings of confederations and also member associations. So that's proof that our system is actually working. What can say? Maybe in the last couple of years, from 2015 to mostly 2016 and 17, we went through different phases of development of this compliance function or compliance, or as you always say, robust compliance infrastructure. First phase was actually to establish a well-run and well-functioning institution. In 2016, 17, and maybe part of 2018 as well, it was very difficult because we all tried to build a strong institution. Of course, administration did mostly, but we built some kind of immune system with all workable instruments. So at the moment, we have now, let's say, 4 major pillars of compliance already installed in our institution or in FIFA. First pillar will be, of course, compliance program with compliance function. I'm pretty much sure that during those next couple of days, there will be a lot of discussion about what is compliance, what is our perception of compliance. So I will not be focused so much as on the compliance program itself. But we also managed to install fully operational internal audit function as well, as important for me, as important part of the control environment within FIFA. And this internal audit is actually functioning well because we now receiving the audit reports and also administration receiving the audit reports. We can change, we can develop. We have a lot of recommendation from internal audit. We have direct links with compliance where something might be potentially wrong even within an institution and outside as well. We have proper risk assessment function as well. Risk assessment that is perceived by FIFA administration as a potential help to define the policies within the next periods, which is very important, not just to have the internal audit or statutory auditor or audit and compliance committee, but also is helpful to administration to define the risk that might be challenges within the next period, of course. For me, it's very important that we have fully operational and independent statutory auditor. Because what happened in past time within FIFA and maybe some other organizations as well, that misdoings was not clearly stated in financial statements, and the risk were not detected in financial statements as well, and all following documents. That is not the case now and could not happen. Even if potentially could go something wrong within FIFA or any other kind of organization, should be detected through statutory audit. I must underline that we have 100% centrally view approach to all member associations using FIFA money in the fourth program, and the same concept and the same principle will be also in the COVID relief plan. So we cover all the risk areas as well. Of course, there we have an external auditor, which is also Audit and Compliance Committee. And we have also all the other elements and instruments that are perceived in the modern theory as absolutely necessary, such as a whistleblower system, such a preventive of the conflict of interest, of different kind of conflict of interest. Because what is interesting in the football world, that the football family might be perceived slightly different as it should be. For me, football family should be, of course, kind of a joint venture of all football stakeholders, from football players to the clubs, to the member associations, to the confederations, to the leagues, etc., join with the same concept and with the same values to promote football, because football is simply too great sport to be neglected and of course misused. But also football family is time to time perceived as a family business within some elements, as we saw in the last couple of years. And we challenge those football families a lot, and I hope that will never happen again. So after a couple of years, I strongly believe that based on the perception of the administration, and also based on some time to time also from our recommendations as well from the Audit and Compliance Committee, now we can be served as best practice model for sport organizations, and what is most important, for our member association as well. Because our member association are of course challenged, not all of them, but some of them time to time, they're challenging the very different situation that we are now able to help them and support them with the governance model that we believe in. And the governance model that we believe in can be seen within FIFA itself, of course. So they can challenge us as well. What I saw is actually that we went through we are going through 4 different development phases from 2016. First one was to establishing the proper and then fully operational institution with strong immune system that I already tried to describe. And then the second phase was to impose the culture of acceptance of this system. Yeah? We spent some time on that, I have to say, because first we have to clearly define the roles of different committees and the role of administration and Audit and Compliance Committee. But in a couple of months or in 1 year, we clearly defined our expectations, and we are doing quite well now. And what is important, that it's not just about the tone of from above, which was never questionable, but it's also from the old parts of the administration. They have to understand, every employee actually, that there are rules within FIFA, that is not a grocery store without a cashier. It's a question of responsibility to all the colleagues, etc., etc. So it takes time to create a culture. But I think we have a culture right now that is remarkable, and we are open to each other, which can be seen because the Audit and Compliance Committee is frequently asked from the administration to advise not just the Secretary General or Deputy Secretary Generals, but also some parts of the administration that are close to us, that are communicate with us. So we have a quite good cooperation also with, of course, the compliance department and legal department. The third phase that we are right now in, that third phase as a phase of development, is to promote that culture, to promote that system that we already built we are right now at that phase. For me, the compliance summit is one of the not milestones, but maybe one of the tools to promote that as well, you know. And close to promotion of that system is inherent need to evaluate the system that we have. And that's what we are doing right now. So we are in third maturity phase, if I may say so. And for me, this is also remarkable as well. What is needed to be to expect from us in this year and maybe next year as well? Of course, it's going to be more difficult because of this pandemic situation that I really hope that it will end in reasonable time, in a couple of months, is to transfer and maybe also to impose the system that we believe, the governance system that we are believing, with all those tools that I explained, to our member association and maybe to some other sport organization as well. I know that is very ambitious plan, but at least within the in football world, simply because it's using FIFA's money or football money, it has to be like that. But what we need is to fully support member associations to implement that kind of governance model that we all believe in, with some certain elements that simply need to be there, like strong and independent statutory audit, which of course, time to time, we are doubting that kind of systems, of course, with a clear defined compliance program, which we can detect more and more. But of course, we have to understand that the different member associations are doing their daily business in a different business environment as FIFA did every day, etc., etc. We have to recognize the differences within the different systems, but some element has to be preconditions to use the funds, because as President clearly stated and underlined, that we are giving more and more money to the member associations to return the money to the football, right? And not that Audit and Compliance Committee is responsible for monitor just the FIFA operations, but also to operation of the use of forward funds around the globe. And we are receiving the central audit reports. We are sending teams to deal with some potential forensic audits. We are asking questions. We have communications with member associations, and we would like to support them more. Unfortunately, COVID stopped us, because we were more and more proactive and organizing a meeting with member association in Senegal in January this year. For me, it was a very good attempt to go closely with member association to challenge all the challenges that they have and support them, and to take any appropriate measure to ensure that FIFA forward funds will be used properly, and not just properly and compliant, but also with the greatest effect that can be, efficient, etc., etc. That might be the next phase in our development, but I think we can be quite satisfied right now. I can assure you, whoever is joined the FIFA Compliance Summit and all the others as well, that during those past couple of years, we probably did turn every stone that was important within FIFA daily operation. Maybe not every stone, but every, of course, important piece of rock within the revenue part and also expenses part, right? And we proved that we tackled some cases of potential mismanagement of the funds, not just within FIFA, but also outside the FIFA. We tackled the question of tax matters, procurement policies, asset management, IT systems, all of them, we need to control them. We define the risk altogether. So I'm very positive, and I think that in next couple of years, we can share this experience also to the member associations, that we can more and more rely on their reports, and that the results will be seen, and they already are, the results will be seen from the FIFA Forward program and Football for School program, FIFA COVID relief plan, and all the other programs as well. That it will be pleasure to check on the FIFA website and see what is the new progress, because each and every day has to be a new progress around the globe based on the funds that are collected by football, the sport that we like so much, right? I don't know if I was in some kind of appropriate time limit, Secretary General, or not. If you need more, I can talk more about the program, because we have a lot of plans. If not, of course, we will support the FIFA compliance program as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I know we could go for more minutes, probably more hours to talk about compliance, but well, thank you for this very informative speech, and thank you for touching also upon the importance of putting in place a successful control environment in order to secure our compliance environment. I'm glad to hear that you and your colleague from the ACC are so far satisfied with the steps that we have put in place to build and consolidate our compliance culture. So thank you for your word of wisdom. Now let's move on to more practical learning, and here we will be sharing with you where FIFA stands on compliance maintenance and how we plan to support our 211 member associations around the world to build and consolidate also their awareness on integrity, transparency, and accountability journey. So the floor is yours. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Greetings from wherever you are joining in from the world, and thank you for attending the general session, a part of FIFA's third compliance summit. Today, I would like to start by sharing with you a bit of my own compliance journey. I will then share my impressions of compliance at FIFA and FIFA's compliance achievements, and finally cover our refreshed compliance program called Compliance 3.0. I am FIFA's Director of Compliance. I joined the team roughly 10 months ago. I may be new to FIFA, but not to compliance. I came from a different industry, so no prior connection to FIFA and football. In fact, I was part of the pharmaceutical industry for many years, a highly regulated industry, as you may know. I will be very honest with you. Before starting last January, I did not know what to expect. You know, one hears all sorts of stories about FIFA in the media, but here I am. Over the past months, I have interacted with various stakeholders in the different FIFA divisions. For example, commercial, tournaments and events, member associations, and so on. My aim was to get a sense of the compliance footprint in FIFA and to assess how well it is embedded. So off I went to assess the compliance program. So what did I discover? Instead of presenting to you today a very lengthy PowerPoint presentation of all these discoveries and findings, my team and I summarized FIFA's compliance achievements over the past 4 years in the form of a 6-minute video, the one you saw at the introduction of the summit, which will be available on FIFA.com. You may have, in the meantime, seen a shorter version of it, which was posted on FIFA's social media channels. In short, I can tell you that I'm pleasantly impressed by what I discovered. And it is important to stop for a moment to recognize and to share with the outside world the accomplishments that FIFA has made in the fields of governance and compliance. In the words of our president, Infantino, during the 70th Congress and just a few moments ago, FIFA as an organization is credible, trustworthy, modern, professional, and accountable. If you don't want to take it from me, the work of FIFA's compliance team is globally recognized by the Association of Summer Olympic International Federations. One of its mandates is with helping international sport federations to promote a culture of good governance within their organizations. Since its inception in 2017, an independent assessment has consistently ranked FIFA in the top quarter. It's worth a visit to the association's website. So I thought, where do we go from here? There is a strong compliance foundation. How can we take it to the next level? The answer is with a refreshed and more dynamic compliance program, Compliance 3.0. This modernized program has two pillars. The first one is based on accessibility. It focuses on making compliance resources available to all stakeholders and follows four basic principles. Those are, it has to be written for the reader, the content must be comprehensive, it must be readily accessible, and be visually appealing. The second pillar focuses on the use of technology and ensures an effective and efficient compliance function. In this day and age, we need to become more agile and leverage technology to simplify processes, both for the end user and also from an administrative perspective. To this effect, we rolled out an internal compliance portal as a one-stop shop for all compliance-related topics, which delivers policies, trainings, and manages our annual conflict of interest disclosure process. This new philosophy stems from observations I have made over the past decades, working in the fields of audit and compliance. There is a trend in some organizations to over-engineer compliance processes. As a result, compliance functions are often perceived as slowing down business decisions. That's where compliance professionals need to reflect and ensure that the compliance framework is scaled to the size of the organization, tailored to the industry, and in line with risks inherent to the business. As an example, in FIFA, we went from directives, documents that on average were 8 pages long, written by lawyers for lawyers, to what we now call the FIFA pocket guides, condensed into 2 to 3 pages, easy-to-use guides. You can Google them or even find them on FIFA.com. With the accumulated best practices that FIFA has amassed over the years, we thought we now need to look outwards and share them with our member associations. With some creativity and the guidance of the FIFA and Audit and Compliance Committee, we designed the FIFA Compliance Handbook, which I'm proud to officially share with you here today. For the users, it is a scalable tool, depending where member associations are on their compliance journey. Larger MAs may have more resources available to them, such as a dedicated compliance officer, where smaller MAs may have one person covering numerous roles, and so can only be partially dedicated to compliance matters. I will briefly share with you a few screenshots of the brand new Compliance Handbook. The design is visually appealing, made of football terminology, but not only applicable to football organizations. It is easy to navigate with quick access tabs, as you can see on the left-hand side. The focus is on 3 main implementation steps: establish, embed, and then evaluate. It provides a scalable approach to implementing compliance in your organization, depending on the resources that you have available. With one easy click, information boxes provide access to templates and sample policies. A dedicated compliance checklist at the end of the handbook can help you track your progress depending on where you are on your compliance journey. So how is the compliance team living football? In my eyes, by sharing compliance best practices, enabling more resources to be forwarded to football around the world. We are working for the service of football. We are the compliance ambassadors of FIFA. So who owns compliance? Everybody in football does. We are all equally accountable, regardless of our title. MA presidents and secretary generals need to set the tone at the top. Example given, the FIFA Secretary General, sitting to my left here today, has been very supportive and actively involved with all the initiatives that you have heard of here today. Where do we go from here? With your feedback, we plan to build on the compliance handbook every year. It is a living document and it will be expanded over time. The handbook will be posted on FIFA.com in the 4 official languages. We will go into greater depth over the next 4 days in our 7 working sessions presented in 3 languages, covering all the time zones of the world and exclusively for our MAs. We have an unprecedented number of participants signed up compared to the previous summits, and I look forward to our interactions over the next few days. In closing, compliance and good governance are paramount to the reputation of football. We need to do it for the fans, for the players, and for the beautiful game. Thank you. So back over to you, Secretary General.
Well, thank you, Patrick, for sharing an overview of the compliance handbook with us, as well as the great accomplishment that FIFA has achieved over the past years. We are privileged to have our next speaker join us at a very short notice, so thank you, Ilya, for being here. This means a lot to all of us, knowing how busy your schedule is. We're glad to have you. We know your commitment, and thank you for taking part today, virtual meeting, to talk about a subject that is also very close to your heart. I now would like to pass on the floor to my former UN colleague, Director of the Ethics Office of the United Nations, Ilya E. Armstrong. She will share with us from Canada the practical example the UN put in place to build an effective compliance program. Ilya, you have the floor.
Okay. So as I said, very pleased to be here. It's a special year for the UN, the 75th anniversary of the founding at the ashes of World War II. And yet we could not imagine a more strange celebration with the current pandemic gripping the world. And I think it is a good time for us to reflect on the value of multilateralism. And of course, that really means public trust, and public trust really means being able to have the credibility of the organization. So I'm very pleased, with this situation. Now, I'm assuming that the PowerPoint presentation is going to go on. I have a few slides. So, thank you. Yeah, and I'm very happy to be able to talk about building a good compliance program and talking about some of the experiences from the UN. And I think I've been well served by my speakers preceding me, because they have already gone into a lot of details of what's important, what are the elements and the governance structures as well. So today, I just want to focus on, what are compliance practices, both from inside the UN and what we look for with our partners, for example, our UN vendors, talk a little bit about the ethics part of that. What does it mean in terms of operational challenges and lessons learned, and then why compliance programs are important, but we've heard strong cases already. Now, we heard a little bit about the journey. I think Patrick has alluded to this, FIFA's journey in terms of compliance, and the UN also has a journey. Since those days of 75 years ago, when the founding member states signed onto the charter and talked about preventing future wars, talked about economic and social development for everybody, and the enjoyment of human rights, the UN has grown phenomenally, both in terms of mandate member states, 193, but of course not as many as your 211 member associations, and areas of responsibility. Well, my story about the compliance journey goes back a little more recently than 75 years. You may remember in 2004, there was a big scandal in the UN called the Oil for Food scandal, which was the largest humanitarian program that the UN was running when Iraq was under Saddam Hussein's regime, and they were running a sanctions program. And they allowed certain amounts of oil to be sold in return for goods for the population of Iraq. Well, when 2004, there were some stories that evidence about corruption and fraud, there was an independent investigation that was led by the then U.S. Federal Reserve Chair, Paul Volcker, who in the end, assessed something like more than half of the 4,000 companies that were involved in the program were involved in either bribes or kickbacks. Now, this is huge, and as a result, of course, there was a lot of political fallout, and many of our UN vendors at that time were kicked off. Well, subsequently, over the years, the UN has run a program and reinstated many of the vendors, provided that they could demonstrate to us, what are the major components of best practices of compliance practices. And I'm really not going to read them all out to you because I think we've heard a lot from the previous speakers. But when we talk about, for example, zero tolerance for misconduct, we're not talking only about zero tolerance for fraud and corruption, but when we apply this to ourselves at the UN, we are also talking about zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment in the workplace. We, of course, talked about the risk assessments that the organization does, because we are involved in so many areas of operation, we have to look at many, many aspects, not only just financial and economic. Then we talk about, of course, tone at the top. This, as has been said previously, this cannot simply be a check the box exercise. This Friday, I have a session with the Secretary General to do a leadership dialogue session with his own office. And we will, of course, share information with the staff so that they not only hear about it, but they can see it for themselves, when we publicize this. Of course, we have the oversight programs, which I'll show you a little bit later, and the General Assembly. And we talked about the importance of being visible, the Ethics and Compliance Program being visible. And the GA continues in terms of giving mandates to make sure that staff are following these elements. We have a robust training program as well inside the UN, and we also provide confidential advice and have various centralized reporting mechanism as well as to the head of offices. We prohibit retaliation for reporting misconduct. This can be a big challenge for the UN, especially given the types of contractual modalities. If someone is on temporary contracts or on very short-term contracts and they want to have a career in some of our field operations, let's say the peacekeeping missions, then there will be a lot of hesitance to come forward about whistleblowing. Accurate books and records, of course, we do have to adhere to the international public standard accounting standards, IPSAS, including having to do vetting for conflicts of interest of key management personnel, due diligence and monitoring of business associates. We'll talk about that a little bit later from the UN, and of course, disciplinary measures and remediation, including when we find criminal conduct, referrals to the local authorities for criminal action in addition to internal administrative action that we will take. And then, of course, self-disclosure of legal and regulatory violations. So this is to show that it is not only that what we are looking for from our vendors, but we can also apply these elements to inside the UN itself. And I think that's because, as I said, back in the 2004 oil for food scandal, what we found out was that not only were there problems with our vendors that were involved in bribery and in kickbacks, but there was lax oversight. And it was an opportunity for the UN itself to engage in management reform. And I think that that's an important thing. You know, sometimes one can use these scandals as an opportunity to make an organization stronger. And I think this is what we heard from President Infantino earlier today. Whoops. I just wanted to show you here a picture of the two leaders and how leadership really matters. And that when you have a complex operating and authorizing environments, you know, there are a lot more commonalities to what's needed in a good compliance program, whether it be in the public sector, the private sector, or not-for-profit sector. So there's a lot of challenges that we share in common. So ethics in the United Nations, we were, the UN Ethics Office was one of the creatures of the fallout of the oil for food program that I mentioned. And the office was created in 2006, along with the internal audit advisory committee to the GA. It also started out at that time, and what we called a bunch of conduct and discipline units, because not only in terms of financial misconduct, we also had, there were very unfortunate sexual misconduct going on in the field, committed by not, you know, it was a lot of the peacekeeping troops that were involved. And so there were these measures. And today, as a result, we cover over 36,000 staff, and including all the contractors and other entities that we oversee, we really cover about nearly 50,000 personnel. There are currently 39 field missions and 130 resident coordinators' offices. So you can see that our operations are really flung around the world with all kinds of challenges. The Ethics Office is independent in the sense that I report to the Secretary General directly. And I think that in terms of any compliance function, then independence, operational independence is a very important thing. We have 5 mandates. I will talk about that a little bit later. And this was in 2006 at the Secretariat. Subsequently, as the GA had asked, the member states had asked, ethics sort of spread out in a concentric circle and covered other funds and programs. Today it is called the Ethics Panel of the UN, which they were created in 2008. And then 2 years later, there's an ethics network of the UN system family and multilateral organizations beyond. So it's kind of a new experience, if you like, in the big scheme of UN history, and maybe somewhat akin to what you are facing, those people who are at this summit today. So my office particularly, we focus more on the preventive aspects of the compliance framework. We have, of course, confidential ethics advice. We have outreach and training. We do only the protection against retaliation for whistleblowing, not the receipt of whistleblowing itself. We have financial disclosure, and we have policy support. That is, we continuously help management review its administrative or management policies so that there will be more more chances of preventing unethical conduct and wrongdoing, if you like. As I had mentioned to you, we heard a little bit about the governance structure of FIFA. Here you have the governance structure of the UN Secretariat in particular. So you've got the General Assembly, the governing body. You've got the Secretary General, the executive, and then underneath you've got the independent offices. You see ethics there. We're the preventive advisory offices. You've got the line departments that carry out the core business of the UN Secretariat, and then you've got the internal oversight, the Office of Internal Oversight, which includes internal audit and investigations. We also have external oversight and external advisory bodies. So you see budgetary body, the audit body that I mentioned to the GA, and then you have the independent oversight body. So we have external audit and external program evaluation. You can see kind of the institutional structure of the compliance framework. So what are some of the challenges that we face? I saw a little bit from Patrick's presentation, of your compliance handbook. There was a reference to gifts, and gifts, because they can also, gifts and benefits can often end up being a form or an entryway into bribes. Obviously, we keep a sharp eye on this. At the UN, all gifts from vendors are zero tolerance. We cannot accept any. From governmental sources, it's also prohibited, except for kind of diplomatic or protocol gifts, and of a nominal nature from non-governmental sources. But this is, again, the staff members cannot keep the gifts. They really belong to the organization. We also have to keep a sharp eye out about unauthorized outside activities. It can be anything from local drivers and security guards in UN offices. Sometimes they're very desired employees by other external businesses. And so we have to say that they must seek prior approval from the head. This can also go into other areas like intellectual property of the UN. We cannot have, for example, personal publications, that uses insider information or unpublished information, or using that kind of material to lecture in local universities. Independence and impartiality are absolutely enshrined under the Charter. There are specific articles that say that UN staff members cannot take any instructions from the outside, not even individual governments, because the UN is a collection of governments. And so unless it has already been agreed to by the membership as a whole, this is very important. And so any sort of self-advancement by colluding with some external entity is something that we guard against. Using UN property or resources for personal benefits, I think you get this in a lot of places. Public pronouncements, we advise very carefully about what people post even in their personal social media. Not too long ago, a very high-ranking UN official, by posting something in his social media account, was asked to leave his office by the host government in that place. So we have to be very strict about this. Undisclosed vendor relationships and investments. Of course, we have our financial disclosure. It's an annual exercise for all senior leadership and our colleagues in procurement and investment, where they have to disclose not only their assets that are 10,000 US and above and liabilities 10,000 US and above, but also their outside activities, leadership and policy-making roles. We have organizational integrity issues and organizational conflict of interest, reputational risks. I think I gave that example of the humanitarian program earlier, Iraq Oil for Food. I talked a little bit about retaliation for reporting misconduct or cooperating with So it's not only reporting misconduct, but cooperating with a duly authorized audit and investigation are also protected activities in the UN. And what we will do, the ethics office, if someone comes forward and says, you know, I reported misconduct and as a result, something terrible is happening to me. For example, you know, they've threatened to not extend my contract, or they're giving me very poor performance reports when I've always had very good ones before. The ethics office will do a preliminary review. We will recommend interim protection measures, and while that is being investigated. And when the investigation report comes, then we will determine whether there's whether the retaliation has been established. I think what's really important to show you how serious we are about whistleblower protection is that the burden of proof shifts when we find a prima facie case of retaliation. So the purpose of the investigation is for management to show that they weren't actually retaliating against the whistleblower or the person who served as a witness. So I think this is a very important key. And finally, of course, fraud and corruption, you know, they show up in all sorts of forms, everything from stealing fuel in peacekeeping missions to stealing weapons in some cases. And all of these things obviously have a big impact for the operation as well as the reputation of the organization. So this is a quick chart to show you that the requests for our services have been going up quite a bit in the last 5 years. They've doubled. And some of the other prevention work that we do a lot of internal vetting, disclosure, and confidential advice. We recognize that in the career or the life of an employee, some of the high ethical risks are at the beginning when they first enter and when they leave as well. So we have a lot of pre-employment vetting of senior officials. Of course, I mentioned about the mandatory confidential financial disclosure. We also talk about, there's a voluntary public financial disclosure. It's the Secretary General's voluntary disclosure, where we put up a summary on the website for journalists to see and the public as well. Confidential ethics advice, and then the training that I mentioned. The outreach and training, I told you a little bit about the leadership dialogue. Every year we pick one topic that's important. Last year it was conflicts of interest. The year before it was about whistleblowing, and the previous year was the standards of conduct. This year it's about civility to try to prevent harassment and abuse of authority in the workplace. And so it starts with the Secretary General, it goes to all the senior managers, and they have a in-person, face-to-face, I guess this year it will be a digital discussion with their direct reports. And we have scenarios that they discuss, and then learning points where we walk the staff through that. And we've had a lot of participation. Last year we had just under 33,000 personnel who participated. We have in-person briefing. After we do the pre-employment vetting of senior officials, I try to talk to all the undersecretaries general, the assistant secretary generals, the heads of peacekeeping missions, and I hold an hour briefing with them to talk about what are some common ethical challenges that they will face and some of the things that they may have ongoing in their offices that they're about to enter. We also have the standard, town halls and groups. We have our online training, both ethics and integrity. We have for procurement officers, procurement training, and preventing fraud and corruption training. And then various types of publications as well. That's just to make sure that you're visible. We carry out, of course, due diligence on external parties. I've got here, who are our external parties. You have donor countries, partner implementing countries, NGOs, vendors, consultants, And the point of it is to identify risks and to provide advice and recommendations to managers about working with these external parties. My colleagues carry out database and services to screen entities in terms of any ongoing legal cases, litigation, government sanctions, and other reputational red flags. We look at our blacklist in terms of prohibited entities who are on our vendors list, and then, of course, a Google search. And you see here the usual list of identified risks, politically exposed persons, defendants in a case, for example. We had actually not too long ago a famous, actually an athlete who we were considering to be like a goodwill ambassador. And when we delved into, the person had an ongoing case, and when we delved into the matter, we found that it wasn't quite as the person had represented it, and therefore the organization decided not to go ahead with a goodwill ambassador appointment. So this is very important. Chairman of partner organizations in terms of, do they have financial impropriety, and also whether partners are also funded by member states. So we have to be careful that there's not a conflict of interest there. What's important? I think what's really important in terms of compliance, we've heard a lot, is that often it is a new function in an organization, and people, I think it was Loretta Lynch, she said that compliance is often seen as another layer of red tape. And it's very important to show and demonstrate your value, not only to management, but also to individual staff, that they understand that, your compliance officer, your ethics officer really should be your best friend in moving forward and dealing with things. And so in order to be effective, you really need not just window dressing, but you really need an office that is well-resourced with competent people who know what they're doing. And they need to also coordinate all the pieces of the compliance functions have to coordinate. You have the prevention piece, but you've also got the fact-finding and the enforcement pieces, and sending strong message in terms of accountability measures. And there's constantly you're moving, you're operating in a moving environment. So the compliance function also, there's a lot of continuity, but has to be cognizant of windows of opportunity as well. Cybersecurity of confidential disclosure data, this is a big thing. If a lot of your confidential data that's deposited with a compliance function is leaked, then obviously it's going to be a problem. There's also, I think, a delicate balance between independence. Management, you want your compliance officer to tell it to you like it is and not be afraid and sugarcoat it, because you really need to know what is the state of play. But at the same time, some managers find that when your compliance officer is constantly seem to be saying no, then they can also go underground and not come forward with matters that they need to look at. And of course, in addition to independence, it has to be aligned with accountability of the compliance function itself. So all this has to be played out very well. And you also have, of course, external partners and other relationships to manage. But the payoff is so great. And I heard the business case already made earlier by everybody. I don't think I need to repeat it. Simply to say, just to summarize, compliance is really about transparency. And when things go wrong, it's the willingness to face what's going wrong and willingness to share that problem internally and externally if required to deal with it. It is about accountability. It's taking ownership of your actions and the consequences. And by doing so, then you build trust, and trust not only with your staff in your organization, but trust externally, because a lot of public sector organizations, and now I would say, NGOs as well, we have public resources placed at our disposal. And then you've got in the private sector organizations, resources of the investors. And so, trust is a very important thing. And that goes to your reputation. If you have a poor reputation, people don't want to do business with you or to work with you as a partner. They want to know that they're getting an honest player on the other side. And I think all of these things really have a big impact on how you carry out your mission, whether it be sports, bringing people together through sports, we the people. In a way, you are also in the with the aim of having a shared goal where people get together for something that they share in common, whether it be the United Nations, because you're trying to have people live peacefully together and governments to operate effectively and in a productive way together. And so all of these things, I think, are very important to whatever our mission is. And so I very much enjoyed hearing about FIFA's developments, and I'm sure that this third compliance summit will be a very helpful to the participants there. And so I thank you so much again, Madam Secretary General and President Infantino, and wish you a rest of a successful summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Ilya, for your presentation that clearly demonstrates the importance of building a strong compliance program in all organizations. And indeed, the United Nations have gone a long way since the 2004 oil for food scandal, and similarly, FIFA has also taken stride to rebuild its reputation since the raid of the Borolak in 2015. And it's great to see also that two leadership of FIFA and the UN are really showing the way and are really showing also strong commitment to rooting out corruption and misconduct out of the two entities that represent the world. And sorry for the short interruption before Ilya's presentation. This is also the price you have to pay sometime when you are relying 100% on modern technology to reach out the world. The President has an urgent commitment, so before I deliver my closing remarks, I would like him maybe to say a few words on the last intervention after the break, and then we'll allow him to leave, and we will be closing. So just bear with us for another 3 to 5 minutes. President.
Thank you very much, Fatma, for your kind words. I would just simply like to thank everyone for having participated. Obviously, Loretta, I thanked her already before. Ilya now, thanks for again for your inspiring words. And when you say integrity begins with me, everyone should say that, and that's absolutely right. And I think the message has been very clear throughout your remarks, but also throughout what Thomas Wessel said, and Patrick as well. We have come a long way as FIFA, but we are not there yet. There is still a long way to go, and everyone must understand very clearly that there is no second way. There is only one way, and that one way is to embrace integrity, is to embrace compliance, ethics, and good governance principles. And that's why, even though this might not be the funniest or most exciting topics that we are dealing with, we have to embrace this way, because this is our responsibility towards a few billion people who love our sport, towards all our partners, those who trust us. We have to follow this way. And when I say we, it's obviously FIFA with all its instances, but it's all the member associations, and everyone actually who is involved in football. And I think, I'm confident that thanks to speakers like you who share your experience with us, and thanks to the commitment of all of us, we can definitely pursue this one and only way to protect our sport and to protect the values which are so important of our sport. So again, thank you very much for your participation. I hand over to Fatma for her concluding remarks.
Well, thank you, President, for the strong message. And let me just rephrase it. There is no U-turn on FIFA's journey to compliance. And I would like to thank all the speakers for their addresses today, which drew on experience and illustrated with real-world example the importance of implementing compliance best practices. And by implementing best practices, FIFA set itself on a path to reform and is now a transparent, diverse, inclusive organization where protecting the integrity of football is at the heart of everything we do. Best practices of our compliance strategy included establishing the FIFA Audit and Compliance Committee and creating a comprehensive compliance program that saw the establishment of a compliance subdivision at FIFA, as well as making transparency and compliance a key principle of the FIFA 2.0, our roadmap to how to grow the game. All of these initiatives have helped us to fulfill our objective of safeguarding football and building a stronger institution. The FIFA Compliance Handbook, which was unveiled today, outlined the best practices for our member association to develop and enhance compliance program. It provides practical resources, including templates, checklists, and decision-making strategy to share with your team members, as well as the last thinking and best practices in organizational compliance. We want to see everyone involved in football carry out their duties with the highest level of integrity and good ethics. So remember to follow the 3 pillars of the compliance handbook: establish, embed, evaluate. Wherever you are on your journey for compliance, this tool will give you the building blocks to develop or enhance a compliance program that works for your member association. And ultimately, as ensuring integrity and compliance in football comes down to each of us. We must recognize the privilege we have to work in developing the game that we love and act with honesty and integrity in our daily life. Most importantly, we must always act to protect the interests of football fans around the world. And I would like to end with the following quote, which I think sums up this feeling very aptly. It takes less time to do the right thing than to explain why you did it wrong. So thank you once again to all of you for your attention, and looking forward to continue the discussion over the next few days. Thank you, Ilya. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you to all our audience around the world. And let's focus on this journey and hear from your experience starting tomorrow. Bye-bye, and keep safe.